Welcome back. It's a Woman Wednesday on Liquid Lunch, and we get the perspective of women as much as we possibly can on Wednesdays. But when we get the whoppers, when we get the monster males, we got to fit them in even on Woman Wednesday. And with everything breaking down across the country, one of the guys who's on the forefront of the campaign for Donald Trump to become president 4 years ago continues to lead New York City in the smallest of minorities and fight Mayor de Blasio and Governor Cuomo. Our councilman from right here in Staten Island, Joe Borelli, joins us right now, along with Frank Morano. And all right, guys, to set the stage, Joe was encouraging leaders to do what's best for their business on Facebook. We were having some fun sparring, and he said, well, if someone does want to take the risk, I'll be the first customer. And then lo and behold, Bobby Catone came forward, and Staten Island's on the map as Bobby wants to open his tanning salon tomorrow. They only have 8 beds, so they can never be over 10 people. And Joe, fooling around on Facebook, said, if you find the place, I'll be the first customer. And apparently it's going to go down tomorrow because Unbelievable is opening. And Joe, I guess you're going to show up with your goggles and your Speedo?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really tan. You could probably see I have a nice healthy glow working, but I think I have to buy some, maybe oils or something for the rest of the summer. But yeah, I'm going to be there. I'll be hopefully making some purchases, and hopefully things go smooth. And this fella, just like many other business owners, can just start putting money back in his register again.
Yeah, so Joe, I think the larger thing is not like opening a tanning salon. The larger thing, and I'm sure you're finding it every day with restaurant owners like the DeLucas and Angelina and Max from Esca's and everyone else, they want to open in some capacity. Sure. Instead of just sitting there watching their business they built their whole life deteriorate before their eyes. And I kind of feel like, Bob, it's not about a tan. Like the haters on Facebook are saying to me like, oh yeah, tanning is essential. I think what Bob's point is, and hopefully many other people who will support him, is no, but small businesses are essential. And at some point, the people just have had enough.
Right. Every business is essential if it's keeping one family off unemployment, if it's paying one family's mortgage, paying one family's rent. I mean, this business is essential because this is what Bobby does for a living. I mean, he doesn't have Plan B. He doesn't have, a separate source of millions of dollars coming in. This is how all small business owners operate. So it's good to see finally someone sort of pushing back on the mayor and governor. But when you talk about big picture, let's look even bigger of a picture. We have the mayor touting that the city of New York is giving away 1 million meals a day. I mean, that's great. But at the end of the day, that is a bread line. So we have 1 million people per day getting food from New York City bread lines. We have businesses going bankrupt, and we have a city budget that's blowing open its own deficit. Now, the solution to all three of these things is not praying for a bailout. It's not praying for some manna from heaven to fall out of the sky. It's opening up businesses again. Look, the city and state are 8.9% partners on every retail transaction. Retail sales tax makes up about 10% of the city's total revenue. So we have had that spigot completely dry up over the past 3 months. We're never going to get back into any phase of recovery if people aren't going to, and again, it's a tanning salon, but I don't care. If people aren't going into the tanning salon buying tans, if people aren't going into the flowers and the florist and buying flowers, if people aren't going into wherever and buying whatever, we're not getting that 8.9% that the city needs. All these progressives, they love the big government social safety net. Fine, that's great. It does a lot of good for a lot of people. But if they want to keep paying for things like free meals or housing or even housing homeless people affected by all these wonderful things they're trying to do, they have to realize that the solution is getting the economy moving again. We did it. We flattened the curve. We had a peak of hundreds of people on Staten Island in beds, just a few weeks ago. It's now down to about 100 people. I wish the mayor and governor would be reopening businesses and giving each other high fives that we're out of this, instead of trying to continue this lockdown in the strictest form. I go to ShopRite. My wife's actually there right now. She's using social distancing techniques to keep herself safe and the other shoppers safe. It bothers me, and it should bother a lot of people, why I can do that at a big supermarket like ShopRite, but I can't do that at the local sneaker store or whatever I happen to be in the market for.
Councilman, let me ask you, since you alluded to the mayor and the governor is actually speaking right now for his daily coronavirus show, this time from Washington, D.C., rather than New York. And he really hasn't said much of anything so far except to rail against Republicans like Mitch McConnell and other people that he used the word un-American to describe, but while at the same time begging for federal aid. Do you think this is the best way for states and cities like New York to get federal aid, by bashing the party that controls half of Congress and the presidency?
No, and especially when that party was more than willing to provide bailouts in the earlier phases of this pandemic. And I think that the city and state will get more money in the form of a bailout. I think a bailout is coming. I just don't know if it's going to be the $60 billion the governor wants. $60 billion, to give you an idea of how much money that is, $60 billion is actually the total amount of revenue generated by the IRS in 9 of our smallest states in the United States of America. Now the governor is asking for that just in the form of a bailout of New York State. So is there some magic number that we're going to end up getting? Yeah, sure. Do we need a bailout? Yeah, I mean, 100%. I'd be the first to say I want the president, I want the Republicans to consider bailing out, state and local governments to some degree. But those governments should be realistic about what problems started on, March 1st. If the problem was there on February 28th, I don't know if it's the federal government's job to solve those. Again, March 1st, pandemic strikes, yeah, please help us by all means. But the reality is also FEMA is covering the cost of 90% of the actual COVID related costs. When we build a hospital, when we pay for supplies, when we house first responders in hotels, all these expensive things, FEMA is actually reimbursing the city and state governments for. But the lockdown itself caused the problem, and that should be open for a bailout. But the state's long-term spending problems, I mean, I don't know if Mitch McConnell or anybody in Nebraska is going to want to pay for per capita spending that exceeds every other city in the United States of America by 3, I think, is the next closest city.
Right. So, Joe, you're going to stay with us for one more segment. I want to ask you, I know that you joined a bunch of other legislators, Senator Andrew Lanza, Nicole Malliotakis, Mike Riley, Steve Matteo, in calling on the governor to look at New York, Staten Island, as its own entity from the city. And everyone says we've met all 7 metrics. We got about a minute here. No, we got 30 seconds here. So let's talk about this in the next segment. And if you don't mind, I have a few suggestions that I want to throw at you in the next segment for quotes that you may want to use if there is media tomorrow. And maybe you can select one to consider, because I've done some serious homework, and I want to have a little fun with it. But I think we're on to something here.
Awesome.
All right. Joe Borelli's with us. He was our assemblyman, so he understands the state bureaucracy as good as anyone. He's also our city council member. Him and Steve Matteo are in the smallest of minorities you could imagine here in New York City, but he's fighting for New York against de Blasio and all this crap every day. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back with more of me, Frank, and Councilman Joe Borelli right after this.